Mark Bailey has apologized for his error of judgment in deleting his private email account but stopped short of saying he would release the emails in question now the investigation into his actions is complete. The accusation was that I was in some way doing something wrong with it and I wanted to remove that as a possibility, but I didn't fully consider the other criticisms that might occur, he said of his actions. In hindsight, of course I would make a different decision. I am not perfect. I admit to the mistake that I have made. He said he had unreservedly apologized to the Premier for the saga. But when asked if he would now release the emails publicly, Mr. Bailey responded, "My private email account has been closely scrutinized by the independent watchdog and there are clear processes there in terms of people making applications to view them." Mr. Bailey will return to Cabinet immediately after he was cleared, Premier Anastasiopoulos Zouk said. Based on the clear finding of Commissioner Alan McSporran, Mark Bailey is returning to duty as Minister for Main Roads, Road Safety and Ports and Minister for Energy, Biofuels, and Water Supply, effective today, she said. Commissioner McSporran stated that there was no basis to pursue criminal conduct against Mr. Bailey for disposal of public records. The Department of Premier and Cabinet has been working with the State Archivist to develop revised guidelines for management of public documents. The State Archivist, in consultation with the CCC, has advised that the new guidelines will not be available until after the CCC has concluded its investigation. Now the investigation has been concluded, I have asked my department to work towards the soonest practical release of these guidelines. His elevation back into Cabinet comes despite Mr. Bailey being chastised by Mr. McSporran for his foolish and injudicious use and deletion of his private email account. Mr. McSporran said the CCC found there was no nefarious motive behind Mr. Bailey's actions that would lead to a finding of corrupt conduct. But he said the actions could amount to technical breaches of the law as well as a breach of the Ministerial Handbook and Ministerial Information Security Policy. Mr. McSporran said the case emphasizes how foolish the behavior is to use a private email account and then deactivate it. He said there were gaps in the law that allowed such behavior to go unpunished. Mr. McSporran said it was a matter for the Premier as to whether Mr. Bailey should be allowed back into Cabinet. There's clearly no corrupt conduct visible in any of this, but it was injudicious to deactivate an account, even if there is nothing to hide. It just gives a perception, he said. To behave that way you create a problem for yourself. It is all self-inflicted and let's hope it doesn't happen again. The CCC has revealed it found no criminal offences have been committed by Mr. Bailey over the use and deletion of his private email account. The CCC did, however, find Mr. Bailey may have breached ministerial guidelines through his actions. The CCC was of the view the use of a personal email account for ministerial purposes is in breach of both the Queensland Ministerial Handbook and the Ministerial Information Security Policy, it stated. As these breaches are not criminal offences, they do not amount to corrupt conduct within the jurisdiction of the CCC. The CCC found because the email account was reactivated, the records within it were not permanently disposed of and therefore the Public Records Act was not breached. The revelation also removes a major hurdle to Premier Anastasiopoulos Zouk calling an early election. The CCC has determined not to commence a criminal prosecution against Mr. Bailey for the use of a private email account and his treatment of public records contained in that email account, the CCC said in a statement. The State Archivist found 1,199 records in the private email account that were considered public records. Under the existing Queensland State Archives, QSA, approved retention and disposal schedules, 539 of these emails were able to be disposed of by Mr. Bailey. The remaining 660 records could only be disposed of with authorization of the QSA. The QSA has not provided any such authorization. The investigation undertaken by the State Archivist found there was no authority given by the archivist or other legal authority, justification or excuse for Mr. Bailey to potentially dispose of these 660 public records. Considering the public records contained in Mr. Bailey's private email account were able to be recovered, and have now been recovered by the CCC with assistance from Mr. Bailey, there has been no permanent disposal. Therefore, there is no basis to pursue criminal conduct against Mr. Bailey for the disposal of public records contrary to Section 13 of the PRA. The CCC acknowledges the timing of the deactivation of the private email account proximate to an RTI request,